Hello, good evening. Today I came home late from work, so I'm reading this book late in the evening. So I'm reading the 11th chapter of A Narration of Sai's Greatness. I hope you guys will enjoy it as much as I do. I'm reading from Sri Sai Charitran actually. So, a narration of Sai's greatness. My obeisance to Sri Ganesh, to Sri Saraswati and Sri Guru Maharaj, to the family deity, to Sri Sita Ramchandra, and my most humble obeisance. I bow in reverence to the most venerable Guru Sri Sainath. To continue from the previous tale, Baba slept on a wooden plank from which his descending or ascending had never been seen by anyone, and which only revealed his incomprehensible ways. A Hindu or a Muslim, to him both were equal, and so we have surveyed so far the life of Baba, who was the deity of Shirdi. And now we begin this 11th chapter, which adorn as it is with sweet tales of the Guru. Should I feel he or be offered with unswerving devotion at Sai's feet. By doing so, we will be contemplating on Baba's manifest form, which will be as meritorious as the 11 readings of the Rudra, and will give us a proof of Baba's power over the five elements, thereby revealing Baba's greatness. Now let me narrate how Indra, Agni, Varun, etc. obeyed Baba's command. Be attentive, O listeners. A personification of the highest renunciation, Sai's manifest form is the repose of his faithful devotees. Let us bring him to mind with affection, love and affection. We offer him as a seat, we offer him as a seat our unswerving faith in our Guru's word, and with the sankalpa to renounce all desires, we begin our worship. Greater even than all the most sacred places of puja, that is the idol, sacrificial altar, fire, light, sun, water, and the Brahman, is Guru Raj. Hence, let us worship him with steadfast devotion. Once you surrender at his feet with single minded devotion, not only the Guru but God Himself will be moved. Such is the marvel of Guru worship, which the Guru devotees should experience for themselves. Only so long as a Guru worshipper is keenly aware of his physical self does he need a Guru in a human form. But for one who has gone beyond his physical self, a formless Guru suffices. Such is a proclamation of the Shastras. Devotion cannot arise without a physical form to meditate upon. And in the absence of such loving devotion, the unbloomed flower of the mind does not open up. Unless it blossoms, the bud by herself can give out no fragrance, no honey, nor will the buzzing bee hover around it even for a moment. That which is with attributes, that is Saguna, also has form without attributes, that is Nirguna, is the formless one. But they both do not differ from each other. With or without form, they are both one and the same. Ghee, that is the clarified butter, when frozen is ghee solidified. But when it is melted, it is still called ghee. That with form and without it is in harmony with each other fill the universe. To be able to gaze at it till the eyes are satiated, to be able to lower the head at its feet, from where knowledge flows freely and directly, it is there that the heart grows fond. He with whom one can converse lovingly, whom one can worship with all the elaborate rituals. He has to be in a manifest form. Truly, it is so much easier to comprehend a manifest form rather than the unmanifest, the formless one. And when love and devotion for the manifest is once rooted firmly in the mind, comprehension of the formless one follows automatically. In innumerable ways did Baba try to bring to the devotees a comprehension of the formless one. According to the spiritual authority of each, he would make them sit apart or deny darshan for long periods. He would send one away from Shirdi, while another would be confined in solitude in Shirdi itself. Yet another would be restricted to the Vada and made to read the Pothi, that is a sacred text, regularly as prescribed by himself. The purpose of the whole exercise was that after a deep study is pursued for over the years, the longing for Baba's presence in the unmanifest form would intensify and his presence would be felt all the time, sitting, sleeping, eating, doing whatever. Mortal as this body is, it is going to die some day or other. Hence, the devotee should not grieve for it, but concentrate their minds on Him who is without beginning or end, that is God. This creation spread out before us in its rich variety is all an illusory manifestation of the unmanifest. It has taken shape out of the unmanifest. It is to the unmanifest that it will return. The whole of it, the creation, right from the Brahman down to the smallish bush, taken either as an individual component of the whole or as the aggregate of the component parts, merged with the unmanifest form, from which it came into being. Hence, no one ever dies. How can it be true then of Baba? Sri Sai is eternally pure, wisdom incarnate, perfect and immortal. Some may call him a devotee of God, some may call him a great Vaishnav, that is a devotee of Sri Vishnu. But to us, he appears as God incarnate. As the Ganga wends her way to merge with the vast ocean, she brings a soothing coolness to those oppressed by the sun's heat along her way, gives life to the trees on her banks, quenches the thirst of all. Such is the case with the incarnation of saints on this earth. They appear and depart, and by the manner in which they conduct themselves, they purify the world, forgiving to the utmost, remarkable, unruffled, and calm, guileless, and forbearing by nature, and incomparable in their perfect contentment. Such a one was Baba. Though he appears to be in human form, he is formless, tranquil, unruffled. He is self contained and liberated inwardly as he moves about in this world. The Godhead himself, even Sri Krishna says, "The saints are my heart and soul, saints are my living image. The loving, compassionate saints are none other than myself." And yet, even to call them my image would not be correct, for they are a constant, unchanging image of mine. It is for their sake that I carry the burden of responsibilities of my devotees. I bow too at the feet of him who surrenders himself wholeheartedly to the saints. Thus Sri Krishna himself proclaimed the greatness of the saints to Uddhava, that is Arjuna. The most perfect among those with form and among those without it, the most excellent attribute of those with attributes, and possessing the highest virtue among the virtuous, and king among them all. satiated in all his desires. He who is fulfilled is always content with what is ordained, constantly self absorbed and beyond joys and sorrows. Who is the splendor of blissful joy? Who can describe the glory of such a one? He is a Brahma incarnate. He is Brahma incarnate, and therefore always beyond any description. It is this power which defies all description that has appeared in the visible form on this earth. He is indeed the same truth, knowledge and joy personified. It is a full awareness of knowledge. He whose heart is one with the Brahman, who is liberated from worldly life and is exempt from the mundane, worldly concerns. He also enjoys a state of oneness with the Brahman and is an image of unalloyed happiness. Listeners have always heard the Shruti proclaim that pure joy is God Himself. The readers too have read it in the sacred text, but the faithful actually experience it in Shirdi. Strange indeed is this worldly life, characterized by dharma, adharma, etc., about which only those who have not realized their self truth will find it necessary to bother and take care of, but is of no concern to the realized souls, for they take refuge only in their self, real self. They are forever free and full of joy, who are the very image of pure knowledge. Baba was himself the refuge, the support of all. Wherefore then a seat to support him, that too the seat of a silver throne. But Baba was indulgent and cared for the devotees' feelings. There was his old seat, a piece of sackcloth on which the devotees would very lovingly put a cushioned seat for him to sit on, and would also place a cushion against the wall at the back that he used to lean on, honoring the feelings of the devotees. Baba too complied with their wishes. Though he appeared to be stationed in Shirdi, Baba moved everywhere quite freely. This was the experience that Sai always gave to his devotees. Unruffled, detached as he was, Baba would accept from his devotees the various rituals of puja, from each according to his faith and in deference to his feelings. Thus, some waved the chowri to whisk away the flies, as some fanned him gently with a fan. Some others offered worship by playing musical instruments like the kettle drums, clarinet, etc. Some washed his hands and feet, some applied fragrant perfumes and sandalwood paste, some made a special food offering followed by the ceremonious betel leaf, that is pan, made with the 13 ingredients. There were still others who applied sandalwood paste, drawing two lines with two fingers as on a shivling, while some mix a fragrant musk with it before applying. Once and only once, Dr. Pandit, who was a friend of Tatya Sahib Nulkar, came to Shirdi to have Sai Baba's darshan. The moment he put his foot into Shirdi, he at once went to the mosque and, making obeisance to Baba, sat down there for a moment to rest. Baba then said to him, Go to Dada Bhatt's, go this way. So saying, he pointed the way with his finger, packing him off thus. Pandit went to Dada's house and was received by him with courtesy. Dada then was all set to leave for the mosque to perform Baba's puja, and asked Pandit whether he would like to accompany him. Pandit agreed and went with Dada. Dada then performed the puja. Till then, no one had dared to apply the round sandalwood paste marks on Baba's forehead. Whoever the devotee and for whatever reason he might come, Baba would not allow him to apply the sandalwood paste on the forehead. Only Mhalsapati would smear it on the throat, the rest applied it to the feet. But Pandit was naive, simple and devout. He grabbed the small dish of sandalwood paste from Dada's hand and holding Sri Sai's head with one hand, drew a neat Tripuranda on his forehead with the other. On seeing Pandit's daring, Dada felt some trepidation at heart. Oh, what daring indeed! And wouldn't Baba flare up by it? He thought. But although the most improbable had actually taken place, Baba had not said a word. He looked quite pleased. He showed not a trace of anger. The incident was allowed to pass. But in Dada's mind rankled an uneasiness and disquiet. On the same evening, he asked Baba about it. When we try to put ever so a tiny mark of sandalwood on your forehead, you do not even allow us to touch it. What is this that happened this morning? For our sandalwood paste, there was so much distaste and disinterest, and for that Pandit's Tripurandra, so much love. What a strange behavior. There is no consistency in that. With smile playing on his face, Baba then uttered these sweet words very lovingly to Dada. Listen to them carefully. Dada, remember, his guru is a Brahmin and I a Muslim. Yet, regarding me to be the same as he has his own guru, he offered me a guru puja. Not only did the doubt arise in his mind that I am a Brahmin, pure and holy, and he an impure Muslim, how can I worship him? And that is how he deceived me, leaving me no other option. Far from denying him, it is he who won me over completely. Dada heard this explanation but treated it lightly as a joke. And it was not until he returned home that his true significance dawned on Dada. Dada was deeply affected by the inconsistency in Baba's behavior. But it was while talking the incident over with Pandit that he realized at once how consistent Baba had been in his behavior. Raghunath of Dopeshwar, and the timing is given, 1821 to 1910, was a Siddha who was also known as a Kaka Puranik, at whose feet Pandit was devotedly attached as a disciple from an association of past births. He called out to Kaka, his guru, and the experience that followed confirmed him in his faith. As is the steadfastness of faith, so is the power of devotion. However, this puja rituals were allowed only when it pleased Baba. Otherwise, Baba would throw away the puja offerings, exhibiting the wrath and temper of Narasimha himself. And while in this terrible form, who had the courage to stand near him? Seeing him so incensed, each and every one ran for the fear of his life. Suddenly flying into rage, he would sometimes take out his anger on his devotees. At other times, softer even than wax, he would be the very image of tranquility and forgiveness. Sometimes he appeared as ferocious as the fire of universal destruction, and kept the devotees as on the sharp edge of a sword. But sometimes he was cheerful and even softer than butter. That's a nice description of Baba. Outwardly, he may tremble with rage, rotate his eyeballs vigorously, but at heart, there flowed a spring of compassion, as in a mother for her child. In the very next moment, he regained his usual calm and composure and called out loudly to the devotees to come to him, saying, "Even if I seem to be angry with someone, my heart knows no anger. Should a mother push her child away with a kick, or the ocean send the river back, only then it is possible that I will repulse you or harm you in any way. I am absolutely in the power of my devotees and stand by their side. For I am hungering after their love. Forever I am hungering after their love, and readily answer their call in distress." And even while narrating this part of the story, another most appropriate tale comes to mind, which I shall narrate. Listen to it attentively, O listeners. Siddiq Falake, a Muslim resident of Kalyan, once came to Shirdi, having just returned from the pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. The old Haji put up in the northward facing Chowdi for the first 9 months, but Baba did not show him favor with any notice and seemed displeased. Time was not yet ripe. All his wearisome trips to the mosque were wasted. He tried in different ways, but Baba would not even look at him. The doors of the mosque were open to all. Nobody had to maneuver a secret entry, but Falake had no permission to come up the steps of the mosque. Falake grew very sad at heart. How strange is this fate that I cannot even put my foot in that mosque. I wonder what terrible sin I would have committed. By what means can I win his grace? This was the only thought that tormented Falake's heart, like a disease day and night. Suddenly, someone said to him, "Do not despair. Seek Madhav Rao's help, and your wish will be fulfilled. If you neglect to take the darshan of Nandi first, how do you expect the Shankar to be pleased?" To Falake, this appeared to be a better course to follow. Prima facie, this may appear to be an exaggeration to the listeners, but such indeed had been the experience of the devotees when they went to Shirdi for Baba's darshan. Those who wished to have a quiet, undisturbed conversation with Baba would always take Madhav Rao with them initially. He would then introduce the topic in soft, sweet tones as to who had come, from where, and what purpose. On this introduction, Samarth would then, that is Baba, would then be induced to converse. Hearing all this, Haji importuned Madhav Rao, saying, "Please remove this restless agitation of my mind once for all and help me attain the unattainable." Under such urging, upon his consideration, Madhav Rao resolved firmly that whatever the task be, easy or difficult, he would give it a try. He went to the mosque and ventured to bring up the topic slowly, cautiously. "Baba, that old man is so sad, so distressed. Oh, why don't you oblige him? That Haji has been to Mecca, Medina, and has now come to Shirdi for your darshan. How can you not feel compassion for him? Oh, do please allow him to come to the mosque. Countless people come, take darshan in the mosque, returning instantaneously. Why then is he singled out to waste away in the languor? Do be kind and compassionate towards him at last, and let him come to the mosque. Then he will also be able to say to you that he wishes what he wishes and go away immediately." "Shama, you are such a newborn infant yet. Unless Allah favors him, what can I do?" Can anyone step up to this mosque without being in Alamia's debtor? Can anyone step up to this mosque without being Alamia's debtor? Inscrutable way are the ways of this fakir here. Over him I have no control. All the same, go and ask him clearly whether he will carefully walk up the narrow path which goes straight beyond the well Barawi. When asked, the Haji said, "However difficult it may be, I shall tread carefully on the path. But give me a personal audience, O Sai. Let me sit at your feet." On hearing this reply from Shama, Baba said, "Ask him further. Will you give me 40,000 rupees in 4 installments?" That's a lot of money in those days, especially. To Madhav Rao, who conveyed this message, the Haji said, "Is this the question to be asked? Oh, I will not give even 40 lakhs when asked. What then of thousands? Oh, will I not give even 40 lakhs when asked? What then of thousands?" When Baba heard this, he said further, "We intend to kill a goat in the mosque today. Ask him which part of the meat he wants. Does he want the meat covered bones or his heart set out on having the sex organs? Go ask that old fellow what is it that he definitely wants." Madhav Rao conveyed Baba's message fully to the Haji, and the Haji categorically said, "I want none of it. If he wishes to give me something, then I have only one wish, that if I get a morsel from that earthen vessel of food, I shall be blessed." Madhav Rao duly conveyed Haji's reply, but as he heard it, Baba at once flew in rage. Himself, he picked up the earthen pot of food and pitchers of water and flung them out of the door. Fiercely biting his own hands, he came and stood next to the Haji. Catching his kafni with both the hands, he lifted up in front of the Haji and said, "Who do you think you are? You boast vainly in my presence. You're flaunting the wisdom of your old age. Is this how you read your Quran, that the pilgrimage to Mecca has made you so proud and haughty? But you do not know me yet." He reviled him thus, hurled at him unutterable abuses. The Haji was absolutely stunned. Then Baba went back. On entering the courtyard of the mosque, he saw some farm women selling mangoes. He bought all their baskets of fruit and sent them to the Haji. At once he turned back and once again went to that falake, and taking out 55 rupees from his pocket, counting them one by one on Haji's hand. So he made him put his hand out and put 55 rupees one by one. The affection between them grew thereafter. The Haji was invited for a meal, as if both had forgotten all that had passed before, and the Haji was absorbed in the experience of joy, experience joy in just being in Baba's presence. Later, the Haji left Shirdi, but returned once again and became more and more attached to Baba. And even afterwards, Baba continued to give him money from time to time. Once I saw Sai Samarth praying to Indra, the god of thunder, who rules over the clouds, and I was struck with amazement. It was a most terrifying moment. The entire sky was overcast and dark. Birds and animals were stricken with fear. There was a fierce gale accompanied by heavy showers. It was late evening. The sun had already set. Suddenly there was a whirlwind, and as the wind roared, there was a great commotion everywhere. To add to it, the clouds thundered overhead. Lightning cracked. The squally wind continued to roar, and there followed a heavy downpour of rain. The clouds rained cats and dogs. Pit pat came the hailstones, thick and fast. The villagers were full of apprehensions. The cattle bellowed helplessly. Under the eaves of the mosque, the beggars thronged together for shelter. The cattle with their calves huddled together too. The mosque was overcrowded. There was water and nothing but water everywhere, and in each quarter there was water. The grass was forcefully borne away on the torment of the water, and the corp in the barn, all cut and ready, was soaked through and through. Among the people, chaos and bewilderment reigned supreme. The villagers panicked and huddled into the Sabha Mandap. Some took shelter under the eaves of the mosque. They had all come in supplication to Baba. Jogai, Jakai, Mariai, Shani, Shankar, Ambabai, Maruti, Khandoba, Malsapati, all these gods and goddesses in Shirdi in some place or the other. But in times of trouble, none was of help to the villagers of Shirdi. It was Sai alone, the living God, who came running to their rescue in the hour of need. He needed no animal sacrifice of a goat or a cock or any offering of money. Sincere love and faith was all he hungered after, and then all their troubles would be destroyed. When he saw how terrified the people were, Maharaj's heart was deeply moved by compassion. Leaving his seat, he came forward and stood on the edge of the raised front portion of the mosque. The sky thundered, the lightning flashed and cracked. In the midst of all this stood Sai Maharaj, raising his voice to the highest pitch and straining every nerve he rode. Dearer than his own life are the devotees, the sadhu and the saints to the gods. It is according to their wishes that the gods act. For them, the gods even appear on the earth. When the devotees implore with their help, gods have to take up the cudgels on their behalf, and rush to their rescue, recalling their great devotion. Roar followed upon a terrifying roar. The sound seemed to fill the sky above. The mosque itself seemed to shake, to tremble as the sound deafened the ears of all. The high pitched voice resounded with the mountain echo through mosques and temples, and once a cloud restrained its thunder, the pouring rain checked itself. Baba's mighty voice shook the entire Sabha Mandap. Perplexed and motionless, the devotees stood still wherever they happened to be. Truly, how inscrutable are Baba's ways! The rain abated, the wind receded at once. Haziness of the fog melted away. Gradually, the rain tapered off. Squally winds subsided. Clusters of stars appeared as a veil of darkness lifted from the sky at that time. Later, the rain ceased altogether. The fierce wind was becalmed. The moon appeared in the sky. Everybody was happy and at peace. Lord Indra seemed to have taken pity. Moreover, a saint's word had to be honored. Thus the clouds dispersed in every direction, and calm reigned after the storm. The rain ceased altogether. A gentle breeze began to blow. The rumblings in the sky subsided completely, and the birds and animals took heart. The cattle wandered off with their calves from the shelter they had found under the eaves of the houses and roamed around freely and fearlessly. The birds flew high into the sky. Being witness earlier to the terrifying spectacle, people now thanked Baba profusely and went back to their respective homes. The cattle, now reassured, scattered here and there. Such is this Sai, kindness incarnate. Great is his love for his devotees, and as tender as a mother's love for his child. How can I ever describe it adequately? Equally great was his power over fire. Listen attentively, O listeners, to a brief story in this connection. It will illustrate Baba's unique power and control over the elements. Once the fire in the Dhuni suddenly flared up at midday, sorry. At such a time, who had the courage to stand near it? The flame soared up in a tumultuous surge. The fire raged wildly as its tongue of flame leapt up, touching the wooden planks of the ceiling. The mosque, it seemed, would be reduced to ashes in no time in this conflagration. Yet Baba was unruffled and calm. Utterly amazed, the people in their worry and anxiety exclaimed, "Oh, how perfectly calm and composed Baba is!" Someone cried, "Hurry up, bring some water." Another said, "But who will pour it? If you try to do so, the baton will come down heavily on you. Who will dare to come forward?" The minds were agitated and impatient, but none had the courage to ask. Then Baba himself stirred restlessly, put his hand to the baton, and looked at the blazing fire. He took the baton in hand and struck blow upon blow, saying, move back, go." He struck hard on the column, which stood at about an arm's length from the Dhuni. Staring at the flame, kept on saying, "Calm down, calm down." With every stroke, the flame began to cover, lose its fierceness. Gradually, the Dhuni became calm. People too lost their fear. Such is the Sai, the greatest among the saints, an incarnate of God Himself. Who will take His hand of benediction upon your head as you place it on His feet in total surrender? He who will read this chapter regularly with faith and devotion, with peace of mind, will enjoy peace of mind and be free of all from all trouble. What more can I say? Purify your heart, be regular in religious observances, and worship Sai wholeheartedly. You will attain the eternal Brahman, that is God. All your desires, even the most uncommon ones, will be fulfilled. You will become completely free from all desires in the end. You will also thus seek to a state of Sayujya Mukti, which is difficult to attain. Everlasting peace and contentment will fill your heart. Hence, the devotees who wish to enjoy a never ending awareness of spiritual bliss should read this chapter with reverence again and again. Such repeated readings of the stories will purify the mind and turn it towards the attainment of spiritual welfare. All that is undesirable and evil will be warded off, and that which is desirable and good will be attained. Everyone can experience Baba's wonderful power by such readings. Himmat Pant surrenders to Sai. The next chapter is very sacred and describes the greatness of Guru Shishya relationship and how the Guru Putra had his Guru Golab's darshan. However, so the trial, a devotee should never abandon his own Gurudev. This is the truth of which Sai gave an actual experience to his devotees and confirmed them in their faith in their own Guru. All devotees who surrender to him are given the marvelous experience of seeing their own Guru in Sai's place as they took his darshan, some in one way, some in others, but each was confirmed in his faith and devotion to his personal Guru. Will be to all. Here ends the 11th chapter of Sri Sai Samartha Satcharitra, called a narration of Sai's greatness, as inspired by the saints and the virtuous, and composed by his devotee Hemant Pant. Om Sai Ram. See you next Thursday.